If you ever move into a quiet American neighborhood where everything feels too peaceful, too still, and one house stands out because no one ever talks about it without lowering their voice, you should trust your instincts and leave before nightfall, because that was my first mistake. We moved to a small town in Ohio called Ravenwood in early autumn, the kind of place where streets are lined with identical houses. Lawns are perfectly trimmed, and nights are so silent you can hear the wind brushing against the trees. And at first it felt like a fresh start for my family, a chance to slow down and live somewhere safe. But from the very first day, the house across the street felt wrong. It was an old two-story structure painted a dull shade of gray, its paint cracked and peeling as if it had been rotting from the inside for years, with windows always covered by thick, dusty curtains and a yard untouched by time, no flowers, no footprints, no signs of life. And yet something about it made you feel watched the moment you looked at it. When we were unloading boxes, I noticed our neighbors staring nervously whenever my eyes drifted toward that house, and eventually one of them, an elderly man with trembling hands, pulled me aside and quietly warned me never go near it after dark, saying only one word, haunted, before walking away as if it already said too much. I laughed it off, convincing myself it was just another small-town rumor meant to scare newcomers, but the unease never fully left me, especially at night when that house seemed to absorb all the darkness around it, appearing like a black void in the middle of the street. On our first night, exhaustion hit us early, and the house fell silent by midnight, but at exactly 3:17 a.m., I woke up suddenly, not from a sound but from a feeling, a sharp sense of alertness, as if something had pulled me out of sleep, and as I sat up in bed, my eyes were drawn to the window without knowing why. And that's when I saw it. The upstairs light in the neighbor's house was on. It wasn't flickering or dim. It was bright, steady, deliberate, and my heart began to pound as confusion rushed through my mind because we'd been told no one lived there. Not now. Not for decades. I told myself it was a trick of exhaustion, maybe a streetlight reflecting off the glass, but as I stared, the light grew clearer and I could make out the shape of the window frame, sharp and unmistakable. I reached out to wake my wife, and before I could even speak, she grabbed my arm tightly and whispered in a trembling voice that sent chills down my spine, "I'm awake, and I think someone is looking at us." And the moment she said that, the light across the street shut off instantly, as if whoever or whatever had heard her. Silence swallowed the night again, heavier than before, and neither of us slept after that, lying there until sunrise, trying to rationalize what we had seen, but deep down knowing something was terribly wrong. Over the next few days, the feeling of being watched followed us everywhere, and every time I glanced at that house, I felt a pressure in my chest, like my body was warning me of danger my mind refused to accept, and the neighbors grew even more distant, avoiding eye contact, shutting doors quickly, acting as if acknowledging the house might invite his attention. I asked around casually, trying to learn more, but people would either change the subject or say the past was better left buried, and that only made my curiosity and fear grow stronger. Nights became unbearable, and every time the clock crept closer to 3:17 a.m., my anxiety spiked, my breathing shallow, my ears straining for any sound. And though nothing happened for a few nights, the tension never eased, because the silence itself felt intentional, like the house was waiting. Then one evening, as I stood by the window staring at the dark shape across the street, I noticed something I hadn't before. The curtains in the upstairs window were slightly open, just enough to reveal complete darkness behind the glass, darkness that didn't reflect the moonlight or the street lamps, darkness that looked deep and endless. And for the first time, I had the terrifying thought that the house wasn't empty at all. It was full of something that didn't want to be seen. I stepped back from the window, my heart racing, and that was when the clock in the hallway chimed softly, signaling 3:17 a.m. once again, and as if responding to the sound, the light in the neighbor's house turned on slowly, illuminating the window, and this time, I was certain of one thing. I was not just watching the house anymore. It was watching me. After that night, fear stopped feeling like an emotion and started feeling like a routine, something that lived with us and followed us through the house, because no matter how hard I tried to convince myself otherwise, I knew the light at 3:17 a.m. was not a coincidence. And once you notice a pattern like that, it begins to control you. I started staying awake every night, sitting in the dark living room with the curtains slightly open, watching the neighbor's house like it was a predator I had to track before it struck, and every time the clock inched closer to 3:17, My hands would grow cold and my chest would tighten. But for several nights, nothing happened. And that silence was somehow worse, because it felt like the house was learning us, studying our habits, waiting for the moment we would be most vulnerable. During the day, I tried to dig into the history of the place, stopping neighbors under the excuse of friendly conversation. But the moment I mentioned the house, their expressions hardened and they either walked away or gave vague answers, warning me not to wake old things. Until finally one woman, her eyes tired and hollow, told me the truth in a hushed voice. Back in 2003, the house belonged to a family of 4, and in the middle of the night, a fire consumed the entire place, killing everyone inside. And although the official report called an accident, the town never believed that, because neighbors claimed the screams had started before the flames, and the fire department arrived to find the doors locked from the inside, with no sign that anyone had tried to escape. That revelation sank into my mind like a poison, and that night when the clock struck 3:17 a.m. again, the upstairs light came on, brighter than ever, and this time it didn't turn off quickly, it stayed on, steady and inviting, and that was when I saw movement behind the glass, shadows sliding across the wall, too tall to be children, too distorted to be human, and one of them stopped directly at the window, pressing so close that I could swear I saw the outline of a face forming in the light, featureless except for where the eyes should have been. Panic took over, and I called the police, my voice shaking as I explained what I was seeing. And when they arrived, their confidence faded the moment they looked at the house, because they knew it too. And after running the address through their system, one officer quietly confirmed the fire had occurred at exactly 3:17 a.m. And ever since then, every family that tried to live there either left suddenly or suffered unexplainable tragedies, and no one had officially owned the property in years. The police searched the exterior but refused to go inside, saying there was nothing they could do unless there was proof of trespassing. And as they left, one of them warned me to keep my distance, because some places don't stay empty without a reason. That warning only made the obsession worse. And the next day I found myself standing across the street, staring at the front door in daylight, noticing details I had missed before, the burn marks faintly visible beneath layers of paint. The door frame warped as if it had once been exposed to extreme heat, and a strange smell in the air, not smoke but something old and sour, like decay that had never fully disappeared. I don't remember deciding to approach the house, but suddenly I was standing on the front porch, my hand hovering inches from the doorknob, my heart pounding so loudly I thought it might give me away, and the moment my fingers brushed the cold metal, the door slowly creaked open on its own, revealing darkness so thick it felt solid, and as I stepped inside, the temperature dropped instantly, the air pressing down on me like a weight, carrying whispers I couldn't understand, and somewhere deep within the house, I heard the unmistakable sound of children laughing, not joyful but distorted, stretched thin with pain, followed by footsteps above me, slow and deliberate, circling as if something knew exactly where I was standing. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but fear had already rooted me in place, and that was when a voice, low and cracked like it had been burned raw, whispered my name from the staircase, asking softly, almost kindly, if I had finally come home. And as the upstairs light flickered on once more, illuminating the stairwell, I realized with absolute terror that the house wasn't just repeating the past. It was trying to make me a part of it. I don't remember deciding to climb the stairs, but somehow my feet began to move on their own, each step creaking beneath my weight as if the house was breathing me in, and with every step the whispers grew clearer, overlapping voices speaking at once, repeating fragments of words I couldn't fully understand, though my name surfaced again and again, stretched and broken like it was being spoken through burned throats. The upstairs hallway was longer than it should have been, bending slightly as if the house itself refused to obey logic, and the walls were stained with dark marks that looked like smoke at first glance but revealed themselves to be handprints when I looked closer, small ones, layered over larger ones, all pressed into the walls as if frozen in a final moment of panic. The light at the end of the hallway flickered, and beneath it stood the outline of a doorway, the same upstairs window I had seen so many nights from across the street. And as I approached, the air grew unbearably hot, heavy with the smell of ash and something metallic, and suddenly the laughter stopped, replaced by coughing, choking sounds that echoed through the hall like dying breaths. When I reached the doorway, I saw them, not clearly, not fully, but enough to shatter any hope I had left, shapes huddled together in the corners of the room, their forms warped and uneven, their skin blackened and cracked like burned wood, eyes glowing faintly in the darkness as they slowly turned toward me. And when one of them stepped forward, I understood with sickening clarity that this was once the father. His face melted into an expression of eternal agony, his mouth opening to speak words that came out layered with the voices of the others, telling me that the fire never stopped, that it replayed every night, that the house remembered everything. I tried to scream, but the sound died in my throat as the room shifted around me, flames licking up the walls without producing heat, shadows writhing as the screams of the past flooded my ears, and the figures began moving closer, not walking but gliding, their movements unnatural, as if they were being dragged by invisible strings. The children reached out first, their hands trembling inches from my chest, and I felt a crushing sadness mixed with terror as their voices whispered that they were tired of being alone, tired of waiting for someone to notice them, tired of burning while the world slept. And that was when the father's voice changed, growing darker, angrier, accusing me of watching, of knowing, of standing across the street night after night, while the light was on, and doing nothing, telling me the house needed someone new to carry the memory, someone who would stay. The walls began to close in, the ceiling lowering as if the house was collapsing into itself, and the last thing I remember before the darkness swallowed me was the upstairs light exploding into blinding white as the voices screamed in unison, welcoming me home. When I opened my eyes again, cold morning air filled my lungs, and I was lying on the grass of my own front lawn, my body shaking uncontrollably as neighbors stood in a loose circle around me, their faces pale with fear and pity. And beyond them, I saw police cars parked along the street, their lights off, as if even they didn't want to draw attention to the house. An officer told me they had found me unconscious just before sunrise, murmuring about fire and light and children. And when I asked how I got out, no one answered, because no one had seen me leave the house. And when I turned my head to look across the street, the gray house stood silent and dark once more, its windows empty, as if nothing had ever happened. We left Ravenwood that same day, packed only what we could fit into the car, and drove for hours without speaking. And for a while I convinced myself it was over, that distance could break whatever connection had been formed that night. But then, weeks later, in a completely different city, I woke up suddenly at 3:17 a.m., my heart racing for no reason at all, and my phone buzzed on a nightstand with a notification from an unknown number, displaying a single message that made my blood run cold. The light is on. I ran to the window and saw nothing unusual, no haunted house, no dark street, just normal city lights. But when I looked back at my phone, another message appeared, this one clearer, more deliberate. We're still burning. Since that night, the messages have never stopped, always at 3:17 a.m. Sometimes just words, sometimes photos of windows I don't recognize, sometimes recordings of distant coughing and laughter, and I've come to understand the truth too late. Some haunted houses don't need to trap you inside their walls, because once they've been seen, once they've been remembered, they follow you, carrying their fire with them, waiting patiently for the moment when the light turns on again, and this time, it's coming from my window.